Hi guys, this is day 12 of the A2 Economics Revision Challenge, and today we are doing a video on long-run aggregate supply curve. We will talk about the view of the Keynesian economists as well as the classical economists and discuss the disagreement between them when it comes to the shape of the LRAS curve. The long-run aggregate supply curve of an economy is dependent on the quality and quantity of inputs that we have in an economy. So we say that in the long run, an economy's supply of goods and services depends on supplies of capital, labor, and the available production technology, which is converting what we say capital and labor into goods and services. So LRAS, basically, according to classical economists, is simply, according to them, is a vertical line that is drawn at the level of GDP, which is equal to the potential GDP. So what LRAS looks like, according to the classical economists, would be a completely vertical line. So let me draw this curve. We have price level on the y-axis. We have real GDP on the x-axis, and the classical view about LRAS is something like this, where LRAS is a vertical line which is meeting at YF. So this is, according to the classical economists, this shows what we call the productive potential of an economy, because it is telling us when we use all our land, labor, capital, enterprise fully and efficiently, we are ending up with YF output. So this is kind of like the productive potential, where basically we assume that all resources are fully and efficiently employed. So that's why we wrote here that the LRAS shows the productive potential. It shows how much real output can be produced with a given level of factors of production and a given level of efficiency. Therefore, it is the full capacity, shows a full capacity where there is no underutilization. So when we are looking at LRAS is just like, according to the classical economists, it is just like being on the PPC, where all resources are fully and efficiently employed. Now, how will this LRAS shift? So the shift of the LRAS, let me write this, shift of the LRAS happens when there is what we call a rise in the quality or quantity of factors of production. So any improvement in land, labor, capital, or enterprise that happens will make the LRAS shift to the right. Just like PPC will shift to the right, LRAS will shift to the right, but in a vertical fashion. So that's how it looks like when there is an improvement in the quality or quantity of factors of production. The whole LRAS is going to shift to the right in a vertical manner, which means now we have what we call a new productive potential. So if this is my LRAS before, let's call it YF. This is my LRAS naught. We will have a new LRAS1, something like this. So YF goes to YF dash. So this shows us what we call a rise in productive potential because of improvement in the quality and quantity of factors of production. An important thing to understand when it comes to the classical view, which says that LRAS is vertical, is the idea that when you are looking at this kind of an LRAS, we have a situation where all markets are in an equilibrium, where basically we are assuming there is no unemployment and all workers who are wanting a job will be offered a job. So demand and supply in the labor market is such that it is at equilibrium and things are such that there will be full employment. So classical economists are of the view that in the long run every market is in equilibrium, and this is where we want to talk about what we call the Keynesian view. According to the Keynesian view, there is a slight disagreement. So let's talk about the Keynesian view. According to the Keynesian view, Keynesians point out that there is a possibility that the markets may not clear for long periods of time, which means market may not come at equilibrium for long periods of time. And if this happens, there could also be a possibility of unemployment that may exist even in the long run. So the first disagreement we want to talk about is just the idea that according to the Keynesians, there will be unemployment that exists even in the long run, and that's why their LRAS looks something like this. So if I draw Keynesian's view in terms of the LRAS, it looks like this. So if we have price level on the y-axis and real GDP on the x-axis, Keynesian's view of the LRAS looks something like this. It is a completely horizontal line in the beginning, and then there's a gradual rise in the LRAS, and then it becomes completely vertical, something like this. So this is the LRAS according to the Keynesians, where this vertical part is where the full employment is, and till the prices are not rising, which is from 0 to y naught, there is what we call mass unemployment. Then comes a time period y naught to yf, where we are nearing sort of full employment, and then comes the point where we are at yf, which is full employment. So the Keynesian view is this, that there could be a possibility of unemployment even in the long run, and then they say that when, for example, the economy starts to near full employment, LRAS starts to rise, although gradually. But when you are at full employment, then they have no disagreement with the classical view, which is that LRA has become vertical. Now, this means something that we need to understand. So, for example, here, let's say if I make my AD curve shift to the right, let's say if this is AD naught, and if AD curves goes to 81, we will not see any rise in price level even in the long run, primarily because the economy has what we call spare capacity to meet the increased demand. But what if the AD rises further? What if AD is like 82 or 83? This is where we can see this, that the rise in AD is causing the price level to rise, because now we are nearing full employment and there is what we call the lack of spare capacity. And then comes, for example, 84, which is basically a time when we are at full employment, where there is no rise in GDP, but there is only what we call rise in price level, because economy has no room for producing more output. So according to Keynesian economists, what they say is this: the rise in AD not necessarily will cause your price level to rise, because there could be a possibility of unemployment. Only when you're close to full employment will you see this to happen, that the AD is going to cause the price level to rise, because we are now having challenges of production sort of capacity. Now, to discuss why the markets don't come to equilibrium for Keynesians in the long run, or why could there be a possibility of unemployment in the long run, while according to the classical there is no unemployment in the long run because markets come back to equilibrium, has to do with what we call disagreement about flexibility of wages. So when you look at the classical view, the classical economists have an argument that wages are completely flexible. According to them, whenever you look at a worker who is finding to be unemployed, he will be very happy to take a wage cut, and so wages are completely flexible, even basically downwards. The Keynesians, on the other hand, feel that wages are not completely flexible downward. In fact, according to Keynesians, wages are, so let me write this, Keynesians argue that wages are sticky, or inflexible downward. And this is a big disagreement because workers, according to the Keynesians, don't want to take a wage cut because there is a demotivation effect when it comes to a wage cut. And also, according to the Keynesians, even employers don't want to give a wage cut to the employee. They would rather want to fire a worker or lay off a worker than to keep the worker and at a lower pay than he was getting before, because he knows that the productivity or efficiency will be much lower. Now, when you are looking at the classical view, let's talk about the classical view of the effect of this flexibility of wages. So the classical economists argue this, that if there's a rise in unemployment, this will lead to what we call a rapid cut in wages, and these cut in wages will make the demand and supply market or labor market to come back to an equilibrium. So I want to show this in terms of a diagram. Let's say right now we are not at full employment, but there is a recession, and let's say that results in the demand to fall. So if this is my LRAS, and let's say we are currently at AD naught and AS naught, we are at an equilibrium at YF, and what if the AD goes down? Let's say because of a lack of demand, AD falls in the economy. Now, this would mean we will temporarily come to Y1. Now, that means basically when the GDP is falling below the full employment, below YF, there is unemployment equal to Y1 minus YF. So, according to the classical economists, if this is a situation that happens where the AD goes down, then there will be what we call a complete flexibility of wages, where workers are willing to take a wage cut. When the worker take a wage cut, your aggregate supply goes sort of up to a level where it comes back to what we call full employment, that is at YF again. So we started at point A, fall of demand made us go to B, and then the wages went down because wages are completely flexible. Workers will be like, you know what, rather than being unemployed, we're willing to take a wage cut. Wages go down. Let me write this. Wages fall, and that causes cost of production to fall, and that causes AS to rise till we come back to YF at point C. So this is what the classical view is, this, that in the long run we will always come back to full employment. There will always be an equilibrium because there could be a possibility of wage cuts to happen. Now that view can also be extended to talk about how about what if you are at full employment and suddenly what if there's a rise in AD and we go beyond full employment. So let's say if this is your LRAS, right, this is YF, and let's say currently we are at AD naught, AS naught, our economy is at equilibrium at, let's say, P naught, and what if now demand goes up to 81? Now this means temporarily you will make workers work overtime, you will try to achieve the extra output beyond full employment. Now this could be possible in the short run if you want to make workers work overtime. In the long run they will seek higher wages. So wages are not only flexible downward but they're also flexible upward. The wages will go up, causing cost of production to go up, causing AS to fall, and us to go back to YF. And that's exactly what will happen. You start at point A, we go to point B in the short run, but in the long run we come back to point C, which is in the long run. So according to the classical economists, LRAS is completely vertical because the wages will adjust itself to bring us back to full employment level in the economy. Now Keynesians may disagree with this. Now Keynesians view is this. So if you are, for example, let's look at Keynesians view. If you are, for example, here in the LRAS, let's say this is LRAS, and let's assume we were at full employment YF, at 80 naught. Okay, so currently we are at 80 naught. What if 80 goes down to, let's say, 81? Now when this happens, because the economy doesn't have flexibility of wages, this unemployment that happens, which is Y1 minus YF, this unemployment that happens will be long and painful. Why? Because there is no automatic adjustment that will happen. So if you look at this economy, there will not be any automatic adjustment, and we will stay stuck at point, for example, B, for a very, very long time. And therefore, according to the Keynesian economists, because there is no automatic flexibility, there is a role the government has to play in terms of actively stabilizing the economy. So Keynesians are of the idea, number one, that that unemployment exists in the long run, no automatic adjustment, and therefore a role of government to stabilize your AD in order to go back to full employment. So these things we need to remember. And all of this stem from the fact that wages, because wages are inflexible downward. People don't want to take a wage cut. Employers don't want to give a wage cut, and therefore that's why between classical economists and the Keynesian economists, classical believe, let the market operate freely, because the market could operate without any government intervention. The markets have flexibility which can achieve long-run equilibrium. But Keynesians say no, that's not true. You need government to intervene. There is an active role of fiscal and monetary policy for the economy's sort of GDP to be maintained.